All right. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Handmade Hero, the show where we code a complete game live on stream. It is day 294. I don't really know what we should be working on today, but I think I still wanted to play around with the movement mode stuff some more. We have a bunch of little like entities sort of working. I don't know. I don't know what we're gonna do. I really don't. You know what? Forget that. Unpack day 293 source code if you want to follow along at home. You know what I want to do today, actually? I want to attack something, I think. That seems like a good idea to me. So let's put combat in. I think that's a good idea. So what I want to do here is I'm going to load up where we were at and just make sure everything is still kosher. Yeah, so here we go. We've got Mr. Snaky Poo. I'm going to go in. Those snakes are too darn long. They take up way too much room for testing purposes. So I'm gonna make those snakes a little bit shorter here. 12 is absurd. So I'm gonna make those snakes considerably shorter so they're not clogging up everything. So there's the snakes, and I'm here hopping around. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to go ahead and get it so that I could attack something. Because that's a major thing that we haven't done really. We played around a little bit with this, with throwing a sword kind of a thing way back in the early days when we were just kind of working on entity systems in a sort of very basic way. But I haven't really ever implemented it for real. So let's do that. And now that we have our brain system, this is a pretty easy thing for us to do as well, I think. So let me go. I'm just going to make, I think, I don't know what we've got for art assets in there right now. At some point, we're going to have to switch up to a new art asset pack. But I think I'll just make like a little square that I can use. Just a little, I won't even use like a bitmap for it because I don't know if we have anything appropriate. I don't really want my dude to attack with a copy of his own head, which of course we could do, but I want to make something where I can attack. And so what I'd like to do is I want to make it so that, you know, I've got my dude here, and when I'm sort of hopping around right now, you can sort of already see that I face in whatever direction I push the arrow keys, and the WASD keys is what I was using to move around, right? But what I actually want the arrow keys to do, although they may also additionally set that facing direction, what I want them to do is I want them to actually do the attack in the direction that I push, right? And you can see that these guys have hit points here. Like that dude who's bouncing around like a maniac, right? He's got 3 hit points. I've got 3 hit points. They're just drawn as those little red squares under there. And so while I'm going to probably have to slow this guy down because he's kind of crazy fast at this point, we haven't really done anything in terms of making monsters do a reasonable thing. But point being, I should be able to make something where I can go up there and kind of wail on him, right? And hit the monster. So that would be good because if we get that going, that would also motivate us to sort of get our collision detection stuff a little more solidified, which is another big thing that we want to do. You know, there's some of it in there already, but it was really not made for the current state of affairs. And so we want to take another look at that anyway and kind of get that going as well. So let's see what happens here. Let's see what's going to happen. So the first thing is the way that the hero attacks in general is there's a couple pieces of the hero, right? There's the head of the hero, there's the torso, and there's the cape part, right? And the idea behind the hero, as you could see from the intro sequence, we haven't played the intro sequence in a while, although I guess I could play it right now just to point that out. Right, because if I go back here, it just goes to the quote-unquote title screen that no one's drawn yet. But then it, I think, goes into the attract mode, right? It should, yeah, there it goes. So, you know, the point here, the idea of what's supposed to happen is the hero has this little glove, this magical glove that Krampus, of course, gave him. And that glove is what he uses to attack. So I want that piece to be floating by him all, like it should actually be on the screen. So that's going to be like an actual separate entity. And depending on what glove you have at any particular time, it should be visible there, right? It should be clear, like, oh, I've got this particular type of glove or whatever. It looks, visually distinct, and you can sort of say, okay, that's the glove that I'm using at this particular point in time, floating next to me. And so when I push in one of the arrow keys, then I want the sort of I want the glove to do that an attack in that direction, like a punch, right? So it should probably be, I'm guessing, something like a swipe sort of a thing. I don't know, like kind of an arc-like motion in whatever the direction is that I push. And depending on the type of glove, obviously it's going to do different things, but that's the basic attack method. So given that, I need to create an additional entity for the glove, and I need that entity to kind of float around by the hero. And it'll probably be relatively lockstep compared to where the hero is. So it won't be like the head and the body where they can kind of float separately. It'll probably be just wherever the body is, the hand is like floating right next to it always. And as the body moves, the hand moves directly with it. And then when you attack, it does that swipe motion probably quite quickly. And I'm guessing that we'll probably have like sort of a blurred swipe, because it won't take long enough to swipe to really be all that visible. So it'd probably like blur across, some kind of a swept look to it. But anyway, yeah. So point being, this is the magic glove kind of thing, and so I want that thing to be hovering nearby to the hero as it adventures around. And we'd probably attach some particle effects to it, because you can kind of see the art, the conception of it, artistically speaking, is that it's kind of got these particle trails on it, and it sort of glows. And so we'll probably make that be reflected in the actual programming of it. All right, so that's what we're doing. So let's go to add hero, or sorry, add player. And so really all I want to do here is say that there's going to be a glove as well. And you can see that we've sort of got a lot of residual stuff in here, right? These like collider things, a lot of these flags, I feel like, and how the collision stuff works, now is probably going to be the time for us to solidify that, because now we'll actually have everything in place and how it's working. We can make some decisions here. I don't know that all of these are going to be necessary, right? Because we may, now that we specify a collision thing, maybe you don't ever need to say that I have a collision thing, but I don't collide. It's like if I don't collide, I wouldn't need a collision thing, right? And that might not be true if I need to have the notion of things that collide with other things if they have their collision flag set, but the other things don't collide in the reverse if they don't, right? So there's ways we might set those, there's ways those flags might mean something, but it's also highly likely that they won't. So anyway, we've got our glove, and its brain slot is going to be brain hero glove, and its brain ID is obviously the brain ID of the hero. And what I'm going to do now, well, in addition to closing out the entity, obviously, is I'm going to need to give it some sort of asset. Now, I don't know, like I said, I'll double check just to see what kind of assets I have, because maybe there was something in the asset system that I can use here. So what would that have been in? I think that was in file formats. So I've got a shadow, a tree, a rock, grass, tough stone, head, cape, font. So I could use, I like how we have asset sword, even though we didn't have a sword in there. So I could grab a rock. We could just use a rock. That's what we were using before, I think. So I'll just add, oops. I don't want to edit that. I want to copy it. And I guess we'll just say, okay, there's a rock. And we'll see what happens. All right. So if we create a rock there and we've got that floating next to the hero, we now just need a little bit more information. This won't be also, I guess this guy would be kind of floating off the ground, but that's a separate issue. So anyway, the glove of the hero is going to need a slot in the brain system because we want the hero to know about his glove. And I think, let's see, hero something collision, hero body collision. Let's see. World mode, hero glove collision. And we don't really know how this stuff is going to play out, so I'm just going to continue making, you know, a dummy for it here, and then we can turn it on to something because we're going to need to know when it collides, right? So now, in theory, we should get these have to be retired in the same order when we actually build things. And I'm glad we put that assertion in there to catch that, because I would have totally forgotten. So this has to be retired, yeah, first, right? Because when you open one of these, you then have to close it, and it keeps track of those. All right. So, yeah, all right. So now what we've got to do, I don't know why we don't see that entity here, though. We should have seen it, I think. We did add it here. We did add the... I guess I don't know. I should probably double check that there actually is... there it is. So I guess the rock... there just isn't a rock asset at the moment. Is that true? Because it looks like if I set it to rock, we don't get one. So that may be true. Maybe I need to use sword. Oh my god. Alright. That's a little bit large. Let's be honest. That's too big. That needs to be significantly smaller. So let's try that one more time. Okay. So that's much better. So now we've got a stupid rock there that's not very interesting, but we've got it. And so now what I want to do is I want to make that follow me around and swipe when I push in a direction, right? So that's what I would like to do. And so I'm going to need a couple things for this. First of all, in the brain code for the hero, I need something that places that thing in a particular location, right? So when I'm walking around, I want to do something here. You can see that I've got sort of this notion of the entity parts. I can grab my glove out of the entity parts. So if I have a glove, here it is. If I have a glove, I can do something with it. And so what I might do is say, well, okay, if I've got a glove, let's just put it next to the body. So if I say, like, okay, if I have a glove and I know where my actual body is, right? And I guess I could sort of do, it could follow the head as well. I don't know which it would follow. I think it's the body that it should follow, personally. So I'm going to say body. So if I have the body, what I need to sort of know is what is the facing direction? And that facing direction will probably determine where I want to place it. Because, you know, as the character rotates, I want it to be sort of off to the side of where the character is. But what side, you know, what is the side of the character is determined by the direction the character is facing. So at first, I'll lock it in, but then we're going to want to change that up. So the first thing I can do is just say, well, whatever the glove, whatever the body position is, the glove position is just going to be the body position plus some fixed offset, right? And let's say that fixed offset is, you know, some sort of very basic thing, whatever that is, right? And you know, maybe I'll get rid of this this offset for now. And so now, you know, when I walk around, that sort of thing will be off to my side. Now, it's not in a great location right now. I think I might argue that that should be, let's see here, brain, argue that that should be a little bit further up, right? Which I can do. Let me just tweak this here. So I should be able to, you know, move this up to roughly where it should be. I think that was pretty good. All right. So now I think that's roughly, you know, that's sort of what we might want. You know, if you imagine putting a real glove asset in there, it should probably hover right about there. And as I'm moving around, you can see it just kind of stays just on that side. And what I want is I want it to move so that it's going to, whatever direction I'm facing, you know, it will align to that side properly. So we do know the facing direction of the character at any given time, right? We sort of set that facing direction here. But that facing direction is actually like a scalar, like it's an angle, and we don't really, I don't really know if we want it to. Well, maybe we do. I don't know. Let's try just using the angle directly, right? So I'm just going to take that angle, and I think we already have sort of an arm construction here, right? So if I say I'm going to take an angle, which is whatever the facing direction is of the body, and I want a vector that's like pointing out in that direction. Now I could say, well, if I have something pointing in that direction, I now want to take that displacement instead of this 0.6 here, right? I want to take that displacement, and I want to use that plus whatever the upward thing is. And that upward thing should really be going in the z, but we still haven't fixed our z. And so maybe this, you know, honestly, this glove situation could actually be the thing where we just use this as the impetus to finish both things, the collision detection and our z determination, which is the other, you know, is other big thing that really isn't, hasn't been nailed down yet in the renderer. Right? We've toyed with that z displacement a ton, and I said a few weeks ago, I was like, here's the final way that it's going to work. And so now we actually have to go and do that, right? All right. So I could do armx here and army, like so. Now, armx and army in this case, they're going to mean something specific. So facing direction is giving me a direction that's where the hero is facing. So if it was 0, you know, it's we're talking about something where it's like this is 0 degrees, right? And then we kind of come around as we go. So, you know, this would be 180, right? Or, you know, or pi, right? And this would be pi over 2 up here, and this would be 3 pi over 2. Or in terms of taus, right? This would be a quarter tau, half tau, 3/4 tau. So, you know, this is the circle we're talking about. If the hero is facing this direction, then I want the arm to be, you know, off to the side. So really, we want to take 3/4 tau and add it to that facing direction so that we can get the direction we actually wanted, right? You know, we want that, right, is the actual thing. And just to underscore that point, let's go ahead and turn that term off temporarily. And you can see, so here's the thing, and it's displaced out to the side, right? But it's displaced in the direction I am facing at any given time, which is not where I want my glove to actually be. So we need to add that displacement to the angle to sort of swap it to be to my side, right? And now it's to my side. Now, I don't want it that far out, so again, I kind of want it to be a little closer into the hero. By default, it would have been 1 unit, but I want it more like half a unit, and so there you go. So now I'm holding that, my quote-unquote glove, which is actually a weird plate rock thing. Now I'm holding that, kind of to the side where I am. And as I move around, I can sort of face in a direction, and there it is. But now I need to be able to kind of swipe attack with that thing out in front of me, right? I need to be able to do sort of an arc attack. And then what I also want to do is I need to know when that thing collides with another object, right? Because I'm going to need to come over here and punch this thing, right? And when I, we need some way of knowing whether I hit it or not, right? So that's another situation that needs situationing, right? All right. So let's think about how we're going to do that. In here, we already know when I push in that direction because we have information about how the hero was pushing. I believe we called it like sword push or whatever. Yeah, you can see it here, right? Here's a bunch of sword information. So D sword tells us what the user was trying to do in terms of pushing in a particular direction. And you can see me setting the facing direction here using it. Now, you'll also note, of course, that we do something kind of stupid, which is, this is one of those, hey, we tan 2 to get an angle, and then we cosine sine it out again later. So, not the most efficient thing, but we don't really care about that sort of thing now. But just, you see some of the times that thing in programming, you're like, oh, hey, maybe I should start just storing this as a vector instead. But yeah, we need the tan 2 for lookups for other reasons. So, it's not the end of the world. Anyway, so when I push this button, I want to initiate a strike, right? I want to initiate a swipe of that thing. And we have this concept of movement mode in entities, and I think that's probably a good movement mode to have. Maybe it's swiping or attacking, I don't know. Attack swipe, I'm not sure. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to set the hand into that swipe mode because essentially when it's, while you're doing that swipe, you can't re-swipe, right? Like you're committed to the attack for a couple frames and you just have to let it run its course. You can't retry to attack in a different direction until the attack in the direction you initially specified is done. So this is going to be very similar to the hopping code, only instead of going between occupied regions, it's really not occupying anything. It's just doing this arc motion. So let's go ahead and get that in there. Here's world mode. And you know what, too? This stuff, this world mode stuff might be time to pull out into the entity code, because this is really all entity code, but, not sure that it really matters all that much. But you see how we've got sort of like execute brain. This could now be a simulate entity call, right? Because this is all just something that happens on an entity. And so if we want to pull it out into there, we usually could. I don't know if it makes sense to do so, but we certainly could. So yeah, if I've got movement mode hopping there, now let's say that I've got another movement mode, and the movement mode that I have here is that attack swipe mode. And then in here I want to do the same exact stuff that I was doing before. Essentially I want to say, well, when I get to the end of the T movement phase of things, right, I want to go back to whatever mode I was, whatever the neutral mode is, right? So I want to say movement mode equals movement mode planted, probably. And so while we're in that movement mode and we say we've gotten above here, or sorry, when we're not above here, then we do the swipe behavior. And then as soon as swipe behavior is done, we go back to planted. So the way the swipe behavior would work is, again, like, the entity P is going to probably be based off of some kind of a, I got to figure out some kind of parameterization when I'm saying I want this thing to attack. I need some notion of how that attack is supposed to, play out, right? Speaking of that, I do wonder if this came from makes any sense anymore. I feel like this came from should perhaps no longer be a actual traversable reference. That's beside the point. Anyway, so we need some way of parameterizing this sort of arc, and or thinking about this. And so, if my hero is here, and I've got the glove here, and I'm talking about this kind of motion, right? It pretty much needs to go out, and I had toyed with this. I don't know. I think I'm going to go ahead and say that this is how this works too. I feel like it probably should do something like you swipe and it goes to this side, and then you swipe again and it comes back to this side. So you're kind of doing left and right side swipings as you alternate through, right? And so I want a way of saying arc around and then arc back. And that's really, that's really it. So yeah. So in this case, when we're doing this operation, really this is a relative space thing, so I got to think about how I want this to work. While we're in the attack swipe phase, I don't really. One of the things that I kind of find is I'm finding that, like, as I code these things, they're very I kind of want to just code them custom, but then I usually want to reuse them, and so it's always a kind of a question of exactly how that should go. I'm going to stick with the thing I've been doing, which is just write it explicitly first, and then make it more reusable as we sort of move forwards. So if I want to do that attack swipe motion, I feel like I want to I want this to stay parameterized in a very similar way, to this sort of a thing here. And so I would say that we probably want, something like this. And what we want to do is we want to interpolate the angle based on that T movement, that T movement information, right? And so that T movement, if we go to the entity, is going to have something like, angle target, like, swipe angle start, or swipe angle target, something like this, right? And and I guess what I would say about this is I don't know exactly how I want the facing direction. So here's what I think. Actually, I do know. So the facing direction will stay fixed during a swipe. Even if you push in another direction, you won't change facing direction. All right, so that's fine. So we have a swipe angle start and we have a swipe angle target, and it'll go between these two. And I think that'll be fine. That's my assertion there. And you know, I'll be honest, it might be that this is kind of just always capable of working this way. I don't know. We'll see. This is again code that I'm not super. I don't normally write a lot of entity code, and so it's always a little bit when we're going through this. You're kind of watching literally me decide as I go, like, do I like this? Do I not like this? And see how things shake out. So I'm constantly like evaluating where do I want to put this piece of code, and I'm trying to let it sort of organically settle into place so I can make good decisions about that. All right. So anyway, if we were going to use this this attack swipe mode, and I wanted to make the arm be placed in this angular way. What I could say is like, well, okay, so there's a movement mode, angle offset or something, and an angle attack swipe, and these are for things that are sort of relative arm-based movers, and so this, oops, what just happened? There we go. So this code right here, right, is the constant angle offset version, and this would be like off of the facing direction. That would be set in the brain, so it would be saying like, oh, let's take the facing direction, and let's set the gloves facing direction maybe to the body's facing direction, so that they're always facing in the same direction. And then here we would just say like, oh, okay, the entity's facing direction, I'm going to take those angle interpolants and I'm going to use those to change what's going on. And even as I'm saying this, I'm sort of thinking too, well, couldn't I just actually move the entities through, like, couldn't I just animate the facing direction? Yeah, it's tricky. Well, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going and see how it shakes out, but I'm pretty sure we're going to go through a couple of revisions here because I kind of sense like, oh yeah, I kind of see how this should go, and it's not quite what I'm typing in, right? So let's keep going down this path, though. So if we were going to do this literally, I would just say, okay, excuse me. Here's the angle offset movement mode. I'll let these cases drop through. Here's how we position one of these things, right? And we'll parameterize as much of them as we want. Right now, we don't really have to do much of that yet, but we'll see how that goes. So yeah, I can just say whatever my what was I saying? Starting angle. So whatever my starting angle is plus whatever my facing direction is going to be where I place myself, and off we go. Or maybe I should do something like this. Right. So this is basically just creating a relative reference frame off of wherever my facing direction is. I'm going to take my angle that I am currently at. I'm going to displace the thing there. And presumably we would parameterize this more specifically later, right? And so then my entity P here is just going to be my entity P is going to be a displacement off of whatever my base is. And so then in the brain, I would set what those are, whatever I want those to be. So I'm saying that the glove's base, angle base, is going to be the body's P location. And then I'll set its entity P equal to these, just like we were doing before. So really very straightforward. Then in the attack swipe, and like I said, I think this isn't great, and I'll kind of touch on why I think there's a better way to do that a little later on. Anyway, so then when we're in the attack swipe phase, again we would then switch. We would regress back to angle offset when we were done. Similarly here, we would want to initialize our movement mode of the glove to movement mode angle offset. And so that, when we actually create the entity in the first place in add player, that's something that we would want to put in here, right? So when we are creating this glove in the first place, we'd say, hey, the movement mode of the glove is going to be the angle offset movement mode. That's how it's placed in the world. So then when we do the attack swipe is really nothing more than saying that the entity angle current equals the lerp of, and I don't remember what we actually called this. I never do. We called it lerp. This is going to be the lerp between whatever the start angle is. We're going to take that entity T movement, and we're going to make the angle end, or target. There we go. We're going to lerp between those. And at the very end of it, we'll make sure that the angle current equals the angle target. In fact, I guess we could say that this is what we do when it's less than 1, is this, and otherwise we do this, right? So we do that T movement lerp. I don't really remember how that gets actually incremented. Like, who is actually incrementing T movement and when? This I ask you, right? Somebody has to update T movement. There it is. So for the attack swipe, we have to also increment T movement at some point as we go, right? I don't know whether this is the right policy for it, exactly when this is happening. But yeah, I could clamp it here as well. And that looks like something that we should pull off as well. Okay, so yeah, that's the T movement stuff. That'll give us the lerping that we want there. And then when it gets to the angle target, it will just sort of record that. Now, like I said, we kind of flip-flop around between those. And so our angle target, when we go to actually execute one of these, our angle target is going to sort of toggle back and forth. So what I kind of want to do is say, well, whenever we get a D sword, there's a couple things we want to do. So first of all, I never want to set the glove's facing direction in a case where I'm doing an attack, right? So what I kind of want to do is say, okay, if I've got a glove and I've got a body, and you know what, I should probably just copy all of this stuff. Well, we'll see how we want to do it in a second. Maybe I'll leave that down there. I've got in case I've got a glove and a body, I know I'm going to set the angle base. I know I'm going to set the facing direction, but I also know that if I'm in the middle of a swipe, I don't want to change the body's facing direction, right? So what I kind of want to do here is say that, well, if the glove's, movement mode is movement mode angle offset, right? Then I'll set it. But otherwise, I don't want to set it. Because until the swipe's done, I don't want to update the facing direction of the body, right? I mean, yeah, to be that of the head. Attack swipe undeclared identifier. Is that so? Oh, you're right. You're right. Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to actually make that start happening. Okay. So now we actually need to set those other angles up. And so to start off with, when the hero is first created, right, I want, at the same time when I do the angle offset, I want to set the starting angle, or I guess the current angle. I want to set that to be the angle I actually wanted the hand to be at. And so, you know, we'll start off right-handed, and then it'll switch to left-handed on the first punch and vice versa. So that's just this, right? And now you can see that it's on the right side always wherever I'm pointing. And so now when I do that D-sword, I want to initiate that attack. So I'm going to go into the brain, and when we do the D-sword initiation, which is in here, and I think what I want to do is say something like attacked was false, and in here I would say that if we attacked, that we set that to true. So if we attacked, then I'm going to set the facing direction, right? If we are, in fact, I guess now I think about it, that would be the better place to do this. So probably we always take the head's facing direction. So it's more like if we attacked, if we tried to attack, we're going to see if the glove movement mode is angle offset. If it's not, we'll turn attack to false, right? So basically, like if we don't have a glove, or if the glove is at rest, or if the glove isn't at rest, then we didn't attack, right? Or I should say, we will say that the attack did not occur if we have a glove and it's not capable of attacking right now. Otherwise, we'll say that we did because maybe there's some other meaning of that. I don't know. Maybe we need to be more explicit about this as well. There might be two different kinds of attack, but we'll see. So if we actually do get into the attacked phase, then we will set the facing direction. And similarly, if we're in the attacked phase and we have a glove, right? In fact, I guess we could do this in here. Well, maybe not. So if we have a glove and we have an attack that occurred, then I'm going to set the glove to a movement mode that it reflects the angle one, right? The angle swipe. And I want to set the starting angle to be whatever the current angle is. I don't know why I should call it current angle, but for some reason I didn't call it that. And I want the angle target to be, you know, it's either going to be that, it's either going to be 75 or negative 25, right? It's either going to be, sorry, it's going to be 75 or 25. But the way round it goes is going to matter, I suppose. Should think about this a little bit, actually. So if this is the facing direction, I probably wanted to call that negative 25, now that I think about it. So that it goes from 25 to negative 25 seems like a better idea. So let's call this 25. And what I want to do is say, well, where is the glove currently? And I'm either going to pick negative 25 or 25. And I'm going to pick based on which side of 0 I'm on. So if the glove is on the left side of the hero, it'll swipe towards the right side. If the glove is on the right side, it'll swipe towards the left. Right? That's what I'm going to try to do anyway. Now, there's a little weirdness to this, and I don't know whether I like it or not. And we'll have to sort of think about this. First of all, it's way too slow, so I got to speed that up a lot. But otherwise, that's doing essentially what I wanted it to do. Let's take a look. Oops. T movement mode. Movement. I just want to change the swipe speed. So there's that attack swipe. So I want that to be quite a bit faster. So I'm just going to speed that up a bit. That's much better. Might even need to go a bit faster. That's probably about right. Okay. So anyway, having my little punching glove here punching is good. It probably needs to go out a little bit from where I am, though, as it goes. And so when we do the swipe attack, I might add a little bit of arm motion in there, a little bit of arm extents, right? So that's pretty easy to do, right? You can see in here we've kind of got this notion of the displacement. And so maybe what I'll do is say, well, all right, so these aren't exactly the same. They aren't exactly the same thing. There's a displacement. And, well, you know what? I can still leave it. To be honest, it's probably fine. What I can do is say, well, inside the entity, because I'm already going to want to do this anyway, where are you? There we go. We would want like something like angle base distance or something, and angle swipe distance. And so in here we could say, well, and then we'd also need the current distance. Current distance. So we just feel like, all right, you know, this right here, this 0.5 is actually going to be the entity angle current distance. Right, it's just polar coordinates here, right? So I'm saying this is how far out the thing is from the body. And in here we could say that the entity angle current distance maybe is some kind of a like interpolation that, you know, gives me at 0.5, you know, it kind of goes out and then back in again, right? So it kind of like comes out from the body and then comes back. So we'll worry about that part in a second, but this is going to be something, right? It's not going to be a lerp. We would probably call this, you know, like a triangle or maybe parabola 0.5 or something like that. We would want to do some kind of a parabola thing where we say, okay, it's the same kind of thing as our lerp function. It's going to take the t movement, and it's going to take the angle base distance and the angle swipe distance, and it's gonna, you know, it's gonna interpolate between them in sort of a like gets bigger in the middle and falls off again at the end, right? And so yeah, I think that's all I really need to do there, and then I just need to set those things when I actually create this. So when I create a player, I'm going to go in here and say we've got the angle base distance and the angle swipe distance and the angle current distance. And this will be 0.5. The base distance will be 0.5. The swipe distance will, let's say, be 1.0, right? So now all I need is a parabola function or some other. I mean, it doesn't have to be a parabola for any particular reason. Let me see. Where's my lerp right there? Inline R32. And really, you know, rather than phrasing it this way, probably the better thing to do would be to say lerp, right? And then do parabola 05 map on just the t value. So that way you can use it with any of the lerp functions, no matter what they're lerping, whether they're vectors or whatever, and you don't have to introduce another function that has multiple forms, right? So when you plug in a t value here, let's take a look at this, right? What I want to do is a function that kind of looks like that, right? And I could, I suppose, maybe I don't want a parabola. I don't know. Maybe I want more of a cosine arc, right? Because that's what that would be, right? So maybe I want a cosine arc that's just normalized so it goes from 0 to 1, right? So it's just like cosine of t over pi, basically, right? Something like this. That kind of thing. Seems as reasonable as any. Now, it's a little more expensive, unfortunately. But, you know. So that seems to still be evaluating oddly. Because I would not expect that. I would expect that to stay at 0.5. Well, that's not exactly true if my parabola function is busted, which it probably is. I like that I called it parabola 0.5 and then did a cosine curve. That's wonderful. Nice work. But yeah, in theory, when we do this, we should, and I guess this is probably something I should do more like this. I should probably keep these the same. In theory, it should return. It should regress back to base distance, which is 0.5, right? Which you can see that it now does because I hard set it, but it wouldn't have otherwise. And if I slow down the t here, you can see that the movement's totally wrong. Right, so this is not at all correct. So my angle base distance, my angle swipe distance, and my parabola functions are not right at all. And so let me double check to make sure they're created properly. The base distance is 0.5 and the swipe distance is 1.0, right? So those are what I would have thought they should be. So the question is my parabola function busted? It might be. Let's see here. Of course, it's not a parabola, for one thing. But let's just double check. Let's see what happens if I just always return 0. I should stay at 0.5 the whole time. And I do. And similarly, if I return 1, I should be for all the way out the whole time. Yeah. Excuse me. So then, for some reason, I'm not sure why, when I do t from 0 to 1, I did it backwards. Right. I want it to go to pi. I want it to go from 0 to pi. So my cosine curve would be this, right? T starting at 0, and also great. I want it to start at 0, so it's a sine curve, not a cosine curve. Even better. Great day today, Casey. Nice work. So that's actually correct. That's what I actually wanted to do. The problem is this is called parabola, and that's not a parabola. So I should probably do like sine 0, 1 or something like that is actually what that should be called. It's also probably better to use a parabola because sines are a lot more expensive than parabolas, but you know. But that's pretty good. And I don't know, that might actually be a little bit more eccentric than it should be. I'm not entirely sure, like, or a little less eccentric than it should be. So maybe like 0.5 isn't even enough. I don't know. It's a good question, and I'm not sure. So like it could be that maybe, you know, this should be like even as low as 0.3. I'm not entirely sure. But we could check it out. And presumably the swipe distance would vary per glove as well, right? Like some gloves have higher swipe distances. So probably, you know, this stuff, the base distance, swipe distance, current distance stuff, I'm just guessing that basically all of these things would sort of be things that change as part of the entity's setting. But I think that's basically it. So really, the next phase would just be, let's attach the collision detector to that, and then I can start to swipe things, right? And you can kind of see why there's a number of kind of weird gameplay things that are somewhat interesting too about the way that this game is designed. Not necessarily saying they're good, because I am not a game designer. But the way that the hero works is kind of unusual, right? Like, because the thing you attack with is not the thing you're moving, there's like a fair bit of kind of like strategic thought involved in where you are going to place your head versus your body and what direction you're going in at any given time. If that makes sense. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that shapes up, right? We'll see. Anyway, so that's all I really wanted to do anyway. And like I said, I think we're basically out of time, so we'll just work on the collision detection next week. And yeah, we're getting pretty close though. I would like that to probably bob up and down as well. Like it should kind of be a little floaty, so we can maybe get that back in there. But that's roughly it. And like I said, you know, that value can be sort of amped up quite a bit. You know, the swipe distance when this thing attacks, like in here or whatever, you know, I can make that, I can increase that distance for some gloves, right, that want to have more of a sweep to them. I feel like that's one reason to use a parabola. You can kind of see how it flies out quite a bit at the ends, and I feel like you kind of want it a lot narrower than that, potentially. So, you know, maybe I don't want that as the function either. Let me just see what some other functions look like there. So let's do like triangle 0, 1. And this would just be, you know, if as t goes from 0 to 1, I want it to actually be, when it's at 0.5, I want it to be at 1, right? So I want the result to actually be twice t, so it goes up there quickly. But then if it's greater then right, if it goes past 0.5, I want it to diminish back down. So I want to basically say, like, if result is greater than 1, then I want to subtract it from 2. Right, so to make a little notched triangle. And I don't know, that might be better. And that does feel a little better. Although it may want to be even more eccentric than that. Right? I'm not sure. All right, let's go ahead and go to the Q&A. Will it support Nintendo's Power Gloves? Probably not, because I don't have one. Nor do I think I have the elite hacksaw skills necessary to plug it into a PC. Probably gotta cut some wires and do some splicing. Soy Sauce the Kid, are chain attacks going to be in by any chance, i.e. / thrust? No, not in that sense. And the reason for that is there aren't multiple attack buttons. If that makes sense. The buttons for attack are the direction to attack. There isn't a button that does a different type of attack, if that makes sense. So there'll probably be some things code-wise a little bit like that, which are based on like the pattern in which you may have hit the attack button. For example, double tapping the attack button will probably be different than single tapping the attack button, but there won't be like a XXY kind of a thing. Novin, what are your thoughts on switching to simulating adjacent rooms rather than using the simulation apron? Well, my thought is that we probably want to set the apron to be the adjacent rooms, but not actually explicitly code it as such. And the reason for that is because we may want to reserve the flexibility to change the size of rooms. And if we hard code a bunch of stuff to be like simulate the next room over, it might be a little unclear what that actually means in situations like where there isn't a clear room, or heaven forbid we decide that a certain room is smooth scrolling and goes on for a while. So I'm thinking that apron may be the best thing for the time being, but I don't really know. Since we don't care, like the sim region code doesn't care how you do the gather, we have a pretty, we can make that decision right up till we ship the game, right? It's like we don't have to make that decision at any particular time. So when we see how the game is playing way on down the line, 200 episodes from now, we can make that call then, and it's not going to really change any of the rest of the code, I don't think. How is the familiar intended to attack some kind of projectile or doing some kind of glide move and physically hitting a foe? I'll be honest, I have not really thought that much about familiars. We will probably have them in the game, but they're not a part of the design I really worked on very much. There'll be a post on Molly Rocket forums, not this week, but probably the next week, that actually has a lot of information about some Handmade Hero stuff that's happening. That'll give a little more insight into that sort of stuff. But basically what I'd say is the reason I put familiars in there during this coding session was not because they were this big part of the game design, but rather just because they were a nice, understandable thing that everyone knows what they are, so that we could just play with coding one and make sure that our system allowed that to happen, right? Will there be a boot to match the glove? No, there's only gloves at the moment. For particle effects for the glove, are we going to be doing something similar to what we did earlier using head assets? Yes and no. The yes part is that the basics of a particle system are always the same. The no part is we probably don't need some of the we don't really need the Eulerian grid-based stuff for something like glove particle effects. So a lot of the particle effects will be simpler than the stuff we implemented when I did the sort of like here's how to do particle systems kind of just example stream. So the particle effects of the glove will probably be much simpler than that, but otherwise, yeah, they'd be similar. Miblo, I'm wondering if it could be a cool mechanic if you could swipe and change your facing direction while you swipe, thus prolonging the swipe into a potentially never-ending spinning punch. So there are sort of the control of the glove will be different depending on which glove you have, and I would like to try some aftertouch on it, but at the moment it's a little early for me to say what of those kinds of things are going to go in the game, because I kind of have to play with them and see, like, stuff like that is a little too feel based to really know what's going to be good or bad in actually playing the game. Have you played Planescape Torment? Your Handmade Hero totally needs a Mort-style familiar. I guess maybe my preference would actually probably be, if I was going to get familiars, would be HK47 from KOTOR. I liked his banter more than Mort's, to be honest. Willing Guzman, will attacking be interrupt, such as attacking an unanimated entity or someone attacked the player from behind and it jump opposite to the attack? Example, old Zelda. So are you talking about the way that it pushes the player? I'm not sure what aspect of it are you talking about. Um, I'm not sure I know exactly what you're asking. In general, attacks will not interrupt the player probably unless they were a very special kind of attack. But attacks may interrupt enemies. So if the enemy was doing something, um, the enemy may get knocked back or whatever. Now, sometimes the player might get knocked back as well, but probably most enemies wouldn't often have that kind of ability, just because I think it's kind of annoying to constantly be pushed around. But you may get gloves that do that, and then you would have more. When you had that ability, you could use it often and that sort of stuff. Duroate, why not leave the glove swipe to the artist animator of the game? So because there is no animator. If there is an animator, then you have to make a little bit of a trade-off there, meaning even if you have an animator, it doesn't mean you always want to leave everything to animations. And the reason for that is animations are not parametric. They don't have any logic in them, right? And so for something as crucial as, say, the way the player hops around or the way that the glove swipes, there's only so much you can do in a canned set of animations. And I don't know that I want... I don't know that I would want those to be canned even if there was an animator on the game. Because, I might want... I want there to be more logic to how it restores and what it does, and I also want it to be more parametric. So it's like every glove that you might get is animated differently depending on stats and things like that. And I think for the hopping and the glove, I think I would probably want to hand code how those worked to a large extent, even if it was a game that was being hand animated by somebody for other things like monster attacks or something, which are perhaps less interesting from the standpoint of hand coding the animation. But it looks like there's really no programming questions here, so I'm just gonna go ahead and wind down. Let's go ahead and close this out. All right, thanks everyone for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero. It's been a pleasure coding with you as always. If you would like to follow along at home, you can always pre-order the game on handmadehero.org, and it comes with the source code. So you can play around with it at home, even as we are building it. We have a forum site you can go to ask questions if you have questions about the programming. We also have a Patreon page you can go to if you want to support the video series. We have a schedule bot where we tweet the schedule if you want to catch the stream live, and we have an episode guide by our very own Miblo, who you can also support on Patreon if you want to catch up with past videos in the series. That's about it for this week of Handmade Hero. We will be back next week I think we've got two big tech things to do before we can sort of consider our entity stuff fairly solid. And that is, we got to deal with our Z placement stuff, and we've got to deal with our collision detection. So those will be some pretty big topics, which we'll probably start delving into next week. But it's pretty cool. I mean, we're already at the point now where the game is starting to look a little bit more gamey, and the world already has that weird feeling of being a little bit active and alive, even though there's really not very much code in there for it. It's just kind of interesting. I mean, it's weird, right? If you just run even what we've got right now, it's weird the transition to once things are active in the world, it just kind of feels like a place all of a sudden that it didn't feel like before, now that there's stuff happening. And especially when something happens like somebody comes down from the top, and onto the screen, it adds this weird, sort of, I don't know. It's sort of, I guess what I would say is, now that we've done sort of the entity brain stuff, the world inside Handmade Hero has crossed that threshold to me to where it feels like it's actually a thing, and that's kind of fun. So I'm looking forward to kind of getting our tech stuff finished up, the few remaining issues we've got that I want done before we move forwards with specific gameplay things, because I think it's going to be fun to just start dumping a lot of stuff in there. That's just my opinion. So anyway, of course, as I say that, now our dude never came down. Why don't you come down to visit us ever? What did we ever do to you, Mr. Worm Creature? He's just kind of chilling out there, isn't he? Yeah. All right, anyway, I don't even know why I'm focusing on that. Point being, so I think it's kind of cool, and I'm looking forward to just, basically dumping. It's fun, too, when you have art assets, like, it'll be fun to dump in some monsters and then start fighting them or whatever, and so it's kind of cool to see that starting to come together. Anyway, that's about it. I will see you guys back here next week. Check the schedule bot for the schedule if you would like to catch those streams. Until then, have fun programming, and I will catch you guys on the internet. Take it easy, everyone.